Everybody, happy Thursday. We're here on the slightly unfamiliar day, given the tight turnaround between last night's fixture against Leicester and our travels to Plymouth, which will be on the road by this time tomorrow. So we thought we'd bring you this show a day early. Adam Harvey, joined by Samuel Seaman for your preview show. Sam, we'll get talking about last night straight away and the reflections on that. I mean, a 2-0 defeat, disappointing, but I thought there were some positives in the second half performance that Norwich can take against arguably the best team in the division. So what are your reflections on that performance, and maybe what were the sort of standouts that Norwich can take forward into the game on Saturday?
I do agree with you. I think a lot of positives to take from it, really, as opposed to any sort of negative feeling. They definitely stood up to the test that Leicester provided for most of the game, especially before that first goal. I was actually impressed with the fact that it seemed pretty 50-50 between the two teams. It wasn't really like Leicester were just coming on to Norwich and Norwich were trying to soak up the pressure and counter-attack. It was actually Norwich taking the initiative to the away side most of the time, and I was surprised to see that to start off with. I think although they did improve in that second half and they did show that they can sort of take control of a game, probably the scoreline dictated that a little bit as well. It's a bit like the Stoke game on Saturday. A lot of people were giving Stoke for their credit for their second half performance and maybe worrying about the Norwich second half. But I think just when a team's 1-0 up in an important championship game, it's just human nature and pretty basic psychology that you just drop deep and you start to maybe take on that pressure a little bit more and start to be a bit more defensive. So I think that worked in Norwich's favour, almost being 1-0 behind in terms of the optics of their performance. But they probably created enough chances to score a goal. For me, he had a very, very good penalty shout when Dimitris Yannoulis went down in the box under a challenge from Wout Faes. So I don't think any Leicester fan could have really had any complaints had Norwich taken a point. Maybe even marginally all three, and that's the positive, really. We spoke about it as an acid test that Norwich would be facing one of the best teams in the Championship, and that this would be a chance to assess whether they were up there with those teams. I think based on performance alone, we definitely saw signs that they could be, but obviously I'm sure we'll come on to it, but Ashley Barnes' injury is another significant blow in the injury department, and long-term things are looking slightly more worrying. I feel worse almost about the striking situation with every game that goes by. So that's definitely a concern. But in terms of general play and the stake that Norwich had in the game against a team who David Wagner thinks will win the Championship, and I agree with him. I think the way they held their own was a positive. And it's nice that I think most fans are recognising that, and there doesn't seem to be too much positivity lost.
Yeah, we'll get straight into that Ashley Barnes injury. Big blow for him personally. He started the season really, really well, I actually thought, with him and Sargent, and kind of struck a good relationship. The partnership was starting to really, I suppose, blossom, really. You could see that the two of them, Sargent being able to stretch the play, Barnes being able to hold up the ball. It was working beautifully. Him and Ida maybe haven't quite got there yet. The balance hasn't quite worked. But last night, again, felt Barnes was sort of marked out the game. Didn't really notice he was on the pitch, unfortunately. But still, given Norwich's striker situation with Sargent being out, how big a blow, Sam, is that he could potentially be missing now for quite a few number of weeks, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a significant blow given the start that he had in a Norwich shirt. He's been one of the best players for the team, especially when Sargent was in it. And I think surprised with the qualities that he's brought to the team, brought a lot of creativity when Norwich needed it most, and a lot of leadership that probably they lose from the pitch if he is injured for a significant amount of time. I did see somebody on Twitter make the observation, or X as it is now, make the observation that he hasn't been especially good since Sargent was injured. It did seem that relationship and that partnership was quite a key part of how he's worked since arriving at Carrow Road. So I'm not sure, had he been lost before Sargent, I think that would have been maybe slightly more worrying for Norwich fans. I don't think he's been at his best in the last 3 games, and he hasn't really been especially involved, to be honest. Although tactically he did work very well with Wagner's system, he is now quite a specific player that Norwich don't really have a replacement for, but they're going to have to find a way to replace if they want to keep going with the same system. But the more overarching concern is almost its combination with Sargent, because Norwich now have two strikers capable of starting for a few weeks, assuming Barnes' injury is as serious as first feared, and now they're going to have to rely on a fairly injury-prone Adamida who hasn't shown that he can really replace Sargent, as well as Hwang Yu-jo, who remains for me a complete unknown at this level, has only played a few minutes of English football in his whole career, and I don't think we've seen much to suggest that he's going to rip it up just yet. And I'm willing to give him a chance. It's not me writing it off. I'm just saying there's no certainty whatsoever over Norwich City's striking situation, and we saw already, just 3 games without Josh Sargent, I think, that Wagner was willing to drop a striker and change his system a little bit to have Liam Gibbs in there. And I think when you're conceding that you're going to have to drop a striker that quickly after Sargent's injury, it probably doesn't look great for that attacking situation. But now they're going to obviously be forced to play without either Barnes or Sargent, who are probably 2 of the first names on the team sheet early on in the season, and long term it is quite a worry. Obviously Sargent will come back, and I think Norwich will be back to their best when that happens, but it's just about what sort of situation he inherits. Because if Norwich are, and this is worst case scenario, but if Norwich are battling relegation when Josh Sargent returns to the fray and returns to first team contention, then there's not much he's going to be able to do to get them back into the sort of playoff mix. So for me, without trying to cast too much negativity on it, it's almost damage limitation while they've got these issues with Marcelino Nunez, another player that's out injured, and just a few things around the squad that look slightly difficult. For the next few weeks, for me, it's damage limitation until they can find a way to get back to their best. And I think Wagner proved that he can put that team together. Nobody really backed them to have the start that they have, but in pre-season he managed to do that. Hopefully he can do that again with Hwang and Ida as his front two. But I don't think I think they've shown that that's still raw and that still needs to be worked on right now. So I do have quite significant fears based on that Barnes injury for Norwich. But I think it would be probably the wrong attitude to have to be completely negative. And I do back them to find things again, but it's about in that time in between how much damage limitation they can do without Barnes, I think.
Yeah, we'll get an update on Ashley Barnes' situation hopefully tomorrow morning when we speak to David Wagner at a 10:30 a.m. press conference tomorrow morning on that one. A few people, I suppose, on Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform it might be, a few concerns over the sort of attacking quality that Norwich now have, I suppose. And given this, loss of Ashley Barnes, it's going to be a lot of workload on Adam Eder and Hwang Yu-jo, who, he's not played a lot of football in the past year as well. So he's going to have to suddenly step up to the mark and probably be featuring quite regularly 5 games in just over 2 weeks. So how do you see David Wagner approaching this game on Saturday, Sam? Because it's quite a tight turnaround as well for every single player from Wednesday night to Saturday. But same system, sort of similar way of playing, or do you see someone like Liam Gibbs dropping back out and going back to maybe what worked in previous games?
I think because of the team that they play, it would make more sense for Gibbs to drop out and to go with the 2 up front. Even against Leicester, I think they looked much better with 2 up front. But Wagner spoke post-match about the need to rotate. I think the manager, Norwich, come up against in Stephen Schumacher. I saw on Terrace Talk, obviously, he spoke to Chris about Plymouth and what their seasons look like. He made a significant number of changes in the week, and that's something that Leicester did at Carrow Road as well. So it's clearly a necessity for a number of Championship managers to rotate their squad and deal with the number of games in a matter of days. And Norwich aren't immune to that. Perhaps even the injury situation is part of that. But the problem for Wagner is his lack of squad depth, and he can come out in the media and claim that Norwich have all the squad depth in the world. I think deep down or otherwise, he knows in quite a lot of positions, his first choice to his second choice is a big drop-off. You look at some players who have played so many minutes early on in this season, and you wouldn't really want to drop them. You wouldn't want to drop Jack Stacey to throw Callum Fisher in there without having played a league game before. At left-back, you're dropping Dimitris Giannoulis, who's one of Norwich's best technical players, for Przemysław Pacheta, who's played probably less than a game and a half in the left-back position. In midfield, you've got Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean, two of the Championship's best and most sought-after midfielders. And behind them, you've got Adam Forshaw, who hasn't played for months. Jakob Sorensen, who's in a similar situation. Not much depth in that position. And you just look all over the pitch, really. And although I'm sure he'd love to rotate, it feels like it doesn't take too many changes for this Norwich side to turn into a cup team. And I think Wagner will want to avoid that. So especially after a negative result against Leicester and a little bit of a slowing of the momentum that we saw at the start of the season, he'll be keen to assert things with the system that Norwich have had. And I personally wouldn't want him to go away from that. I wouldn't want, after 2 losses in 7 Championship games, for him to immediately give up on the philosophy that looked so good at the start of the season. I think he should persevere with it, and I think he will personally at Plymouth. But where he possibly can trim around the edges, I think it's definitely possible that he will. But he said post-match that John Rowe will start the game. Obviously, in other positions, it doesn't look like he's got much of a choice. So I don't think we'll see wholesale changes, but obviously the Barnes injury is likely to force him into 1 or 2, and he's going to have to adapt his system to that loss. So I think we will see some changes. But again, if he went, 5 or 6 changes, I think that means a significant drop off in the quality for Norwich, and that is a bit of a worry. But I don't know if I'm just being overly negative. Is that a sort of worry for you? Maybe the lack of squad depth. Do you think that's something that's maybe shown itself a lot in the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think they're actually probably waiting for Borja Sainz to be back. I think that maybe gives them a different option, in that Fashnak could potentially move and play that number 10 role, which is, he's got the build to be able to hold the ball up a little bit. And I actually think he's played there, I believe, for young boys before. So that potentially gives David Wagner a different option. And then you've got Eder and Wang to potentially rotate in the front 2 positions. There's actually a few people in the comment section mentioning, has the window closed for free agents? We're suddenly looking worryingly light up front from Jeffman. I believe you can sign free agents at any point during the season, but given the way that Norwich had to sort of, I suppose, adapt their financial position to be able to bring in Wang, it probably feels a little bit unlikely that they could go in the market and get another striker in. Of course, we don't really know the extent of the Ashley Barnes situation yet anyway. That will probably dictate the whole mood there. Joe, similar. Ashley Barnes being injured, I agree with Jeffman. We're a little bit light up front. Is it time to panic? I also think we should have had a penalty last night. What's your sort of take on that, Sam? Is it time to panic? I mean, I kind of spoke there about the Fashnak option. Is there other players that could potentially, I suppose, David Wagner spoke about having options that can play in other positions, versatility. Is there, a way that Norwich can muddle through, I suppose, until they get these other options back?
I do agree with you, really. Normally, I think probably having watched years of England, I'm against managers trying to crowbar their best 11 players into the team in the best possible way. But I think with the lack of depth that Norwich have and the poor bench that they've had at times this season, it may well require shifting those players around. I agree with you, actually, that Fastnacht would be a great option for a number 10. And I know we see all the time these theories that maybe players could play in certain positions, and it's not quite as simple as that. But as you say, Fastnacht has played there, albeit not especially often in his career. But the comparison I'd make, and I know I'm not the first one to make it, is Marco Stiepermann. He was somebody who suited that role perfectly. And I think in modern football, where the Wes Hoolahan type number 10 doesn't really exist anymore because managers don't want to sacrifice a player in their defensive, athletic, physical profile just to have somebody creative in that position. I think Fastnacht's actually your ideal midfielder. I think he could definitely play in a central role, and although he had a bit of a shocker last night, he clearly has the technical quality to be able to provide for the other strikers. Obviously, Sainz is a very big part of the equation and a very key option, having been signed in the summer as what felt like a marquee signing at the time. I think Jonathan Rowe's good form at the start of the season probably takes a little bit of pressure off him. I think had Rowe not played the way that he has in the last few weeks, then there probably would have been this feverish anticipation for him getting into the team, and then he would have been, for the first time in English football, coming into a team with just immense pressure to go and create. So I think in a way it's a better situation for him to come into than maybe I was anticipating when he first got that injury and when we first learnt of that injury at the Kings Lynn game. a few months ago. And as you say, he's somebody who will provide a different option. But it also means that Norwich now are probably quite heavily unbalanced in terms of where the quality of their squad is. They've got a lot of good wide options now, while their striking situation looks pretty poor. And if Fastnacht could maybe contribute centrally, and there are a lot of players that probably could. I think Wagner even spoke about Poeta as a striking option after that Sargent injury. Then I think that's definitely a route that Norwich could and should look down. But as you say, we're talking about Barnes in quite a hypothetical way, when it could be 4 weeks or it could be 8 months. We really don't know at this stage. So I think that will dictate quite a lot of it. But it's certainly true that Barnes' injury does require a rethink from Wagner. And although the options are limited, if he can look for a sort of unconventional scenario and solution to that problem, then it might be there. We've seen that he's open to doing that as well. Poeta is now, to all intents and purposes, a left back, having been a winger throughout his career. So Wagner is clearly open to looking outside the box, and I think he does have the options to do that. But again, that's not really the situation anybody wanted after the start of the season.
Yeah, I'm sure Ashley Barnes will be gutted to not be facing Plymouth. It's where he got his sort of break in the English Football League under Ian Holloway there. So big blow for him there personally as well. We'll flip the attention now forward to the Pilgrims and their start to the campaign. Currently in 18th position, 2 wins, 1 draw, 4 defeats. But home form's the key for them. 20 wins in 23 games last year in League One at home park. They've got 2 wins in 3 already in the Championship there as well. They're a very difficult team to beat at home. They've got a few Norwich City connections as well. Saxon Early, although he is out injured. Barley Mumba, of course, who joined them in the summer for around about £1 million from Norwich City. A few disappointed fans, I think, at the time when he left, but David Wagner obviously, of course, felt that Jack Stacey, Kellen Fisher were more natural right backs and fitted his system better. Barley Mumba 1 goal so far this season. That was against Huddersfield on the opening day. What have you made of, 1, Plymouth so far this campaign, Sam, but 2, Barley Mumba?
I think they've made a better start than I was maybe, and a lot of people were anticipating. It's easy when a team comes up and maybe doesn't have the history behind them that an Ipswich or a Sheffield Wednesday had coming up from League One, to write them off and to say that they're a small club and they won't achieve. But at this level, it's not really about that. It's not about spending power or the number of fans that a club have. I think momentum is a really, really important part of it. I remember Wolves coming up, I think in 2014, and beating Norwich and looking the better side in that game. And I think when you go down to the EFL, the level between the Championship and League One is a much smaller jump than it is Premier League to Championship. So I think, or Championship to Premier League, sorry. I think a lot of people maybe underestimated them coming into this season, but I went to watch Ballymumba actually at Burton in an international break last season, and they looked really, really good. They looked a very dangerous side, and they looked to cut above League One, as they proved to be. So when a team finishes with that number of points, I think teams and fans should be wary of them when they come up to the Championship. And they're not just here to sort of fight for their lives and defend. It's not a characterless team, as we often see when you get promoted. And I actually think it's quite sad. We've seen it with Norwich a few times. They go up and everyone just says, oh, well, abandon all your principles, do everything completely average, do a bit of this, bit of that, and then you might just about manage to stay in the league. But Plymouth have adapted while also keeping some of the characteristics that they thrived on in League One. I think they've got a number of players that are really exciting. Morgan Whittaker, obviously Ballymumba, Norwich connections or not, is somebody I actually just really enjoy watching, and I think can be a very effective player at this level. And then up front they've got Ryan Hardy, who I saw a few Scottish fans talking about maybe getting a call up for them. So he's clearly somebody that's on fire. That's doing very well at the moment. Plymouth have got already a decent number of points for a promoted side, I think, in terms of fighting against relegation. A point per game isn't a bad ratio, and I think personally that they have a pretty good shout at staying up. As you said, that home record means that it's probably a difficult task for Norwich going there, and might be slightly more difficult than a lot thought it would be. Perhaps some lessons are going to be learned from the Rotherham game, when, given the momentum Norwich had at the time, I think people thought they would just roll up to the New York Stadium, have it pretty easy, knock the ball around and win the game comfortably. That obviously didn't happen, and I don't think that will be the case against Plymouth. But that's just the Championship for you. It almost sounds like cliches, and I don't want to sound like we're football managers when we talk about it, because every time I come on the preview show I say similar things, but I think that is just the Championship. The teams are so close together compared to the Premier League, where it's almost an impossible task for some teams to beat other teams. I think in the Championship it's just so close together and so unpredictable that it's really hard to say that at any point Norwich are going to go anywhere and feel confident about them going and smashing anybody. Even in their most comfortable win of the season against Huddersfield, it wasn't a 4-0 game. And had they not got the second goal quite early on in the second half, or the third goal, then I think Huddersfield may have had a decent chance at getting a point in that game. So there's no easy games in the Championship, as much as I am adhering to the cliche a little bit there. But yeah, I think Plymouth are a really good side, and it should be quite an entertaining game.
Yeah, it does feel important that Norwich can sort of bounce back from the defeat against Leicester. I mean, 6 points in a week would feel like a pretty good return from those 3 fixtures. But as we've already said, not an easy place to go. And with that, going to get your thoughts on the game, Sam, more generally, and a score prediction as well for the viewers.
Yes, it's a difficult one. I agree with you that most Norwich fans would have taken 6 points. I think even out of the Stoke and Leicester game, had you said 3 points from them, I probably would have been happy with that. Stoke have a pretty good side, and Leicester, it's pretty close to a free hit. So I was actually saying to a fan yesterday that I was speaking to that I think 3 points would have been fine out of those 2 games. That's obviously what they've taken, but probably the fact that they didn't get a result against Leicester does put slightly more pressure on Norwich to go and do something significant against Plymouth. Prediction wise, I've got 2-1 in my head. I think had Ashley Barnes stayed fit, and maybe this Josh Sargent blow hadn't happened a few weeks ago, I would have seen a lot of goals in it, maybe a slightly more end-to-end affair, but Norwich will have to adapt. I don't think they have the attacking quality that they have without Barnes or with Barnes and Sargent, sorry. And they may have to adapt to that. So I'm going to say 2-1 to Norwich, a narrow win, maybe even a Ballymumba goal. But yeah, it's going to be a close one, I think. And if Norwich win, I think it will be quite significant, not only to the narrative of their season, but just a bigger and a better win than I think a lot of people would realise it was at the time. So yeah, I'm going to say 2-1, but now I'm going to put the pressure right back on you to see what you think it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I was speaking to Chris on Terrace Talk a little while ago, which you can go and watch now on the YouTube channel for all the insight on Plymouth. He went for a 2-2 sort of high goal scoring draw, and I could probably see something similar. I think Plymouth are a very good side at home. Norwich, given the issues up front, potentially no Ashley Barnes, of course, and no Josh Sargent, I think it's going to be a sort of different game than if those two would have been available. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw as well. I think high scoring game, lots of entertainment, which would be good for the travelling fans, although I'm sure they'll all be making that long journey home for 3 points, not 1. So we'll see what we get. Norwich actually haven't played at Home Park for 15 years. The last game there was a 2-1 win. Sibieski and Lupoli, the goal scorers for Norwich that day. So that tells you quite how long ago that was. They're unbeaten in the last 3 games against the Pilgrims as well. We've got a couple more comments we'll get to. Jeffman, would you expect Borja Sainz to start/come on in the cup game against Fulham, or will it be too soon for him? Played 45 minutes against Wolves Academy on Tuesday night. I think Norwich Academy are playing Everton away tomorrow night as well. So I'm intrigued to see whether he's potentially, going up to that game, whether he'll be involved maybe now given the injury to Barnes, whether he could potentially take a place on the bench on Saturday. Your thoughts on that one, Sam? Given that Fulham Cup tie midweek next week, is that an opportunity to see Sainz for the first time in the first team?
I think it might be as a substitute. Obviously, only 45 minutes for the under-21s. You'd probably like to get him up to 90 at that level before he's sort of integrated into first team selections and decisions. But given there's obviously that game is on the Friday night, they've got 5 days for him to recover and see how his body reacts before Fulham. It makes sense to me that he'd be on the bench at least. It would be quite nice to see him in the first team for the first time, but I've heard lots of good things about how he played against Wolves on Tuesday, and hopefully he can make a significant impact because I think Norwich may need it just as he comes back into the team. So yeah, I wouldn't rule it out, but I'm sort of teetering 50-50 at the moment because they will want to be careful with it.
Yeah, Jeff as well. I hope you guys have a lengthy playlist for the journey there. It's about seven or so hours, Sam. We're making the journey down to sort of Somerset area to stay over tomorrow night to break the journey up, and then the trip back on Saturday night. I suppose you're looking forward to it. It's a different ground. It's a bit of a long way. It feels like it's kind of one of them where you could get to the middle of Europe quicker. But yeah, are you excited, I suppose?
I said to you yesterday, you said about the fact that it's a new ground and it'll be nice to be at a ground, and I agree with that, to be fair. If we're to isolate the football and the, from 1:30 before the game until 7:00, 6:30 after the game, I'm very much looking forward to that. The problem is, as you say, that 4 hours looks like it's going to be about 20% of the overall package of actually going to cover that game. So from a sort of travel point of view, I'm not especially excited. I'm looking forward to going to a new ground, to being at a club that seems like a pretty nice place to be. But yeah, it's going to be a tough old slog to get there. But yeah, thankfully we've got the Carrow Road Stadium playlist. I'll try and get that off someone so that we can get it blasted in the car all the way there. I'm sure Mr. Davitt in particular will enjoy that. We know how much Connor Southwell enjoys sort of light shows and that before games. So yeah, hopefully we can tantalise those two with that playlist. But yeah, I just really hope Norwich get 3 points, because that, like 6-7 hours on the way back after the game, if they don't, not only for us, but for those unbelievable fans that are unbelievable, by the way, that are making that trip. I don't know what they're paying for coaches and how long it's going to take and what time they need to get out of bed, but to be fair to them, that's absolutely unbelievable. We talk about it and I'm feeling pretty sorry for myself, doing this as my job, and to be doing this out of your own pocket and out of enjoyment and commitment to this club is unbelievable, and an unbelievable testament to these fans. So they definitely deserve 3 points, and hopefully Norwich can produce. But yeah, I suppose, are you looking forward to it? Looking forward to the long drive?
Yeah, I think the travel is probably the element that I'm not looking forward to. Unfortunately, our budgets don't stretch to the Carrow DJ in the car, but I'm sure we'll have a pretty good playlist on the go. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. As I said to you last night, different ground, and feels like an opportunity to maybe get back to winning ways. And the fans are going to bring the noise if they've had that lengthy journey. Then they're going to want to try and get behind the boys, and hopefully they can reward them with a good performance and 3 points to get, not necessarily the season back on track because it's been a positive start, but at least get the winning momentum back in the field, around the club. So that would be positive. And with that, we're going to round off the show. Lots of great content across our channels at the moment. Everything you needed to know from last night. So David Wagner's reaction, Enzo Maresca's reaction, Connor's verdict, everything from that Leicester game that was less than 24 hours ago now. You can go and watch that. We've also got Terrace Talk Up, which is with a Plymouth journalist, so everything you need to know about the opposition. That's going to be on the YouTube channel already. Sam's recorded a tactics board, which will go up first thing tomorrow morning, so you can wake up to an early alarm call and watch that. David Wagner's press conference 10:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, so that will be on our YouTube channel early afternoon. So everything in terms of the team news and the Ashley Barnes situation, you can get everything you need to know there. And the Pink and Plus app is also the place to go. $1.99 a month for the first 2 months, $2.99 a month thereafter, or $29.99 for an annual subscription. We got there, a bit of a tongue twister, that one. So that's well worth checking out. Lots of great content in terms of written, audio, and video over there. So we like it. If you want to come and join the journey, then why not come and join us over there? And with that, we're going to sign off and prepare ourselves for the long journey tomorrow, ahead of the smaller journey, I suppose, on Saturday morning to reach Home Park. And we'll be at Home Park 2 p.m. for Team News Live. All the live coverage of every single kick will be across our channel. So we'll be there. So if you're not going to the game, then we'll be there to give you everything you need to know. And with that, we're going to sign off. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. If you're making the long trip, enjoy the trip. Hopefully you get a good game. And if you're not, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on Saturday.